CIA.
We're ready to go. All right. Good evening. It is Monday, September 27th. This is the Board of Ed workshop meeting for the Board of Education in Guilford, Connecticut. Our workshop agenda tonight starts with a report on the summer learning pathways overview. I'm turning to Dr. Crystal. Wonderful. Thank you.
So we're here to highlight the wonderful things that happened this summer. We had a very lively summer. We had a summer learning pathways program, and we also had a summer learning pathway for teachers. And I'd like to introduce you to Jennifer Orman. Jennifer is a 5th grade teacher at Baldwin, and she's also a doctoral student at Central Connecticut State University, and she's about to defend her dissertation in a couple of weeks. So
Good luck.
Right there about that.
Wonderful.
So Jennifer was the facilitator of the summer program, and she is going to take you through a little tour of what we did this summer. And we are fortunate to have two high school students with us who participated in one of our summer pathways. And they are going to share the TED Talks that they created with you tonight.
Oh, wonderful.
Take it away.
Yes, sorry, you should feel free. We have kind of as a policy, if you're comfortable, noted that the person, we're all obviously wearing masks,
Yes.
but the person who's talking may feel free to take it off.
Right.
It may also help the people who are watching us through the live stream
Thank you.
hear better.
It'll help because my glasses are.
Yes,
fogging
I
up.
have
There
found
we
that
go.
to be the case as well.
Feel your pain.
Okay, so I'm so thrilled to be here this evening to share with you. We had a fantastic summer. Picking images to share with you from the summer was really hard to do. We had hundreds of amazing images. And I'd like to begin by telling you that this summer really focused on inquiry project-based learning. So as students engaged in their learning pathways, it was about inquiry, it was about creating projects of their interest. So here's just some background information or overview of the program. It was over 4 weeks this summer. There were 102 students, grades K through 10, rising kindergartners through 10th grade. There were 12 learning pathways, 3 in-person learning days per week, 2 virtual learning days per week, and 70% of kindergartner and first graders pre and post assessed grew in their phonics skills, identifying letters and sounds and spelling. Exciting to note. These were the summer pathways that children could choose from, families could choose from. And just to point out, it's rising kindergartners and first graders. So that was a very exciting time for the youngsters. Being at the high school for all of the younger students was amazing.
We had a few really popular pathways. The Creature Powers pathway was really popular with K-1 students. The Design Your Treehouse was really popular. And the theme park design.
I was
also
gonna say, it
really
had to be the
popular,
theme park.
yeah. Those were 3 of the most popular ones. And we had run 2 out of 3 of those last summer to begin with, and we were fully virtual, so we brought them back to be in person this summer. They were very well attended.
It was very exciting. I think the younger ones found the building fascinating, especially the bathrooms. Everyone's underneath your water. That's exciting. Here are just some images as students began to dig into their project, really initially beginning to understand what they were interested in within their pathway. This building was truly lively on those days that we were here. The staff members were dynamic.
Good question. So if you had, like, how were they assembled? Like, did each pathway have its own area, or was it all of the kids from a certain age category, regardless of their specific pathway, were together?
Each pathway, so if I go back a slide, had their own classroom, and then the school, the vice principal who supported us here every day was fabulous about having areas open to us. So we had the tent outside available to us. We had right out here available to us, the front, really the whole building. We just were very aware of other programs that were happening in the summer. They couldn't have been more helpful at the high school here. It was fantastic.
And Julie's here. And, she told us, and Mr. Buno, and also told us that they loved having the little kids here. They don't normally have little kids running around here, but they loved having the little kids here. So
So I'd like to share with you some student feedback. We surveyed the 5th through 10th graders and some of the feedback that we got in regard to new information and ideas that they were taking away from their pathway. One student wrote, "This program helped me become more proficient in public speaking, giving feedback and editing my writing." Another noted, "I learned more fun ways to make my house more eco-friendly by maybe doing the worm composting or more." What part of pathway did they like the best? They loved building models, including lots of hands-on work. And many students said they just couldn't pick what they liked. They loved it all. One theme that ran through all of the feedback from students and parents was that for next year, possibly not having virtual days. They really liked being together.
How was the attendance during the virtual days as opposed to the in-person days? Did it vary at all?
I don't think so. I think it was pretty high, although, we were really respectful that it was summer. So
right.
there were different activities going on. And I think that the teachers, having been virtual all the year before, were really good at managing, doing large group, small group, individual time online and offline. And they think they balanced it really
Excellent.
well.
It was also a shorter time
Okay.
on the virtual days, so the full days were like 3-hour days, and it was 2 hours
Gotcha.
virtual, because we didn't want them to be on the screen the whole time.
And I have actually a slide that shows you some of the virtual learning days,
Neat.
and you'll see how else they were able to engage students. And here we can see, such talented teachers that are playing their guitars, dancing with the students as they were learning about their different pathways. I was in awe of their creativity. So some of the parent feedback, and again, I tried to pull like through lines out of the feedback of things that I noticed frequently. The students had an option to go to Park and Rec. Dr. Crystal arranged it so that in collaboration with Park and Rec, they could attend, and they have the site here. Also on the virtual days, Park and Rec was housed here, and the students who needed that care could come here and engage virtually, and then enjoy the activities of Park and Rec. And that was very helpful for a lot of families who work. My daughter loved her program through and through. We were thanked for providing a safe and nurturing environment, connecting kids and classmates and teachers during the summer. There's an awareness of the impact of the pandemic that families have suffered through, and being together was really important. And the teachers were clearly dedicated and enthusiastic. One parent wrote what a godsend the program was, especially after the difficult year. And not only academic, but the mental health benefits were enormous. And then other benefits they noted was the socialization, routine development of early research skills, being engaged in the learning process, making new friends. And one parent noted noticing a regression usually in speech over the summer, and that their child was just flourishing this summer.
If you look at the little feedback graph at the top too, the top bar is all the parents who said they would send their students back next summer. So we had only one no and one maybe. The rest were all yeses.
Wow.
It's fantastic.
Teachers invited special guests to participate as well. We had Meg's Point come to do programming with some of the younger groups, and that was actually facilitated by a 2021 grad, Julia, who was fantastic. She was thrilled to be back here. We had parents who are archaeologists come and do presentations for their group. And then we had another Guilford High School student come to another group to work with the students to learn about the culture of India. It was really quite engaging. Some of the teacher feedback that we got in terms of inquiry based, we also did backward design in order to develop the pathways. Dr. Crystal and the coaches did that for the pathways, and it allowed students to use their prior knowledge, learn knowledge and creativity to create a final product that was their own. And it was a great way to structure the session. Everyone knew where they were headed from the start, the teachers, the students, and the parents. It's a great way to design learning. And then what did the teachers learn about their students? One wrote that I learned that each of my students have passions and pasts that are unique to them. And that although our students were young, backing away and giving students creative freedom really showed growth and independence within our group. It was great to see how students could grow on their own and problem solve. It was powerful for the teachers this summer too with their learning. What did teachers learn about themselves? One noted that learners of diverse ages respond positively to freedom to progress at their own paths in learning accomplishments. And one learned that students are more capable than some would like you to believe. So you need to find a connection, identify their passions, and simply care about them as human beings. So this was a virtual learning day. Couple of virtual learning days. You can see students sharing. We had, again, Meg's Point coming and doing a virtual day. You can see that the whole class together. The screen shares, they were working together on a shared document. And then this was our last day of the summer learning pathways. We invited families to either join virtually or in person. And you can see the Jeep that's in the middle that one of the groups made. That was their safari Jeep out of a big cardboard box for a refrigerator box. That was loads of fun. And you'd see different theme park designs there and different animals that you would see in the safari. So it was really a great time to not only join virtually to see what the students were working on over the summer, but for some groups to see it in person. True celebration of accomplishments. Oopsies. So now I would like to introduce two of our oldest students that participated this summer in the TED Talk program. We've got Pragati, who did her TED Talk on how restructuring inclusion can save creativity from education's guillotine. And then Claire has her presentation on how listening to classical music can change the world. So should I decide who's going first, ladies, or are you guys going to decide? Oh my goodness. Okay, well, why don't we start with Claire? Want to come over here?
Come right over the podium, Claire. Thank you for joining us.
How listening to classical music can change the world. Who here can say that they have experienced the stress of school, projects, and tests? Well, I definitely have. I remember the last time I had a big project to present in front of the whole class. It was a history project, a project where I had to talk about and research about someone in a certain time period. My teacher gave me. History is not my favorite subject. Because we had to present the project in front of the whole class, eye contact was also part of it. I had to look in the direction of the audience, meaning that I had to memorize some of the points I was talking about. They also mentioned that it was a group project. Group projects aren't also my favorite thing. Although we had to work by ourselves, since we each had a different person to research, that still definitely added to the stress of the project. As you can see, I was not happy about researching the project, nor was I happy about somewhat memorizing the points and what I was going to say. But I can say that doing a certain task, more like listening to a certain type of music, helped me. It increased my work rate and made the experience of researching and memorizing more pleasant and faster. And that music is classical music. I can clearly see the difference it makes when I'm listening to it at home versus the vast sea of silence and a few occasional or constant screams of the other kids heading to lunch at school. I was researching websites for the project, creating the slides, and practicing what I was going to say in front of everyone. I would listen to classical music. My ability to concentrate and actually do work and not staring up into space increased. And so did my ability to memorize. Most importantly, I became less stressed. This is why I believe that schools should play classical music in the classroom during classes, softly, like of course, like background music. No one wants to work in an environment where Mozart's 40th Symphony is blasted through the speaker. Or give the students who dislike classical music the option to work in a quiet environment where they're completing individual work. Classical music can change the world because if it's played in schools, it can improve students' performance in school. It is important for students to perform well in school because the more skills they learn, the more it will help them later on in life. So, why is classical music better at making people concentrate, increasing the ability to memorize, etc.? Why not heavy metal? Why not rock? According to a study from the University of Helsinki, the participants who listened to classical music for only 20 minutes a day were affected positively by it. Their memory improved, and the research team also sensed an increase in dopamine, meaning that listening to classical music makes people happy. But to people who like rock or pop music, it makes them happy too. So what's the difference? Other forms of music do increase people's mood if they like it, but it doesn't help with concentration. Many types of music have lyrics in them, or a strong beat or rhythm, or even both, which can hinder people's concentration instead of helping them. Most of focus on the lyrics, singing along to the lyrics, or nodding their head to the strong beat of music, instead of focusing on what they're working on. Now, some of you may be wondering, what classical music should I play to my students? Or what kind of classical music should I listen to when I'm working on something? First of all, just a simple YouTube search of calming classical music would work. Or create your own playlist and put your favorite classical pieces there. Although to people who are knowledgeable in classical music, just searching that up isn't the best exposure to all forms of classical music, but it definitely works. But if you want to learn more about it, but it does the job. For me, I like Chopin's nocturnes. Tchaikovsky, Mozart, or Bach's piano pieces work really well. By definition, nocturnes are music inspired by the night, so they are soothing to listen to. Bach's piano pieces usually don't have many drastic changes in volume, so it's really good to listen to while working. Tchaikovsky and Mozart are just fun to listen to and gets me motivated to work or study. But what about some classical music teachers should avoid playing during class or when you're trying to concentrate or study? There aren't many classical music pieces that shouldn't be played while concentrated on projects or essays, but they can definitely exist. For example, classical music that varies greatly in volume should be generally avoided, such as music that starts out soft, then bam, the entire orchestra suddenly plays a loud chord or passage. Once I was listening to Haydn while studying for a piano harmony exam when a certain piece popped up. Ah, yes. Haydn Symphony number 94 in G major, also widely known as the Surprise Symphony. To summarize the melody, it was soft and gentle, except the parts where Haydn decided to gracefully sprinkle in a huge loud chord that would scare and startle his audience to prevent them from falling asleep in concerts. At first, when the piece started playing, I was concentrated on my studying, and I didn't know what it was. Then the dreaded chord popped up. Of course, it scared the absolute heck out of me, like a horror movie jump scare. Well, what about those who don't like classical music or find any type of noise or music annoying? If teachers play classical music to students who don't want to listen to it, then wouldn't it be not beneficial to the students? I suggest doing a poll among the students. Whatever wins, the teacher can go through with it. The students can also sit away from the speaker since the classical music won't be playing that loudly at all. To summarize, classical music increases people's mood, ability to memorize, and the ability to concentrate, which is why I believe that classical music should be played softly in schools during class. Classical music can change the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daddy, would you like to come up?
How restructuring inclusion can save creativity from education's guillotine. Can you imagine a world where conformity rules everyone's lives? A world without laughing children full of whimsical ideas and strong passions? A world where people whose voices aren't heard remain unseen? I can. With the path our education system is taking, it seems like these events will not only be hypothetical, but soon happening. I've experienced how education can sometimes stifle creativity. As I went through my elementary and middle school years, I noticed that schools and parents alike pressure children to excel in mathematics, science, and technology. I love reading and music, but I'm pressured to focus on math and science because it can help me get a scholarship to a prestigious school, or I could use it in a future career. I'm just a kid, and yet these things are shoved at me. My passions are scoffed at whenever I discuss them with my parents. Gone are the hopeful, you can be whatever you want when you grow up. And now they're replaced with which colleges can give you a successful career, which achievements can get you into the said colleges, and how you can achieve these accomplishments with a 4-year plan of study throughout high school. I'm the lucky one in my family, but what about other people who are only seen but not heard? Not only has our education system destroyed creativity, but it has ignored children and young adults with disabilities. According to the American Association of School Administration, we haven't quite reached the point where we have fully included students with disabilities in schools. But there is a positive among these negatives. Over the past 25 years, we have seen schools include more students with disabilities, and now 52% of these students are educated in the general classroom. Maybe you've been wondering why we should have inclusive education. What's the point? The point is to increase creativity and a sense of teamwork and community among children. The benefits far outweigh the consequences. According to a thesis made by a university student at Rockport University, the benefits include academic achievement for all students, building friendships, and a strong sense of leadership between students and teachers. However, it isn't all sunshine and rainbows when it comes to inclusive education. Certain challenges are faced by both the students and staff in an inclusive school. By adding students with all disabilities, we have to take into consideration that we may need to change the school's curriculum and change the accessibility for physically disabled students. It's important to note that if we truly want every student's voice to be heard, we cannot rush this process of inclusion, or else the results will be disastrous. We can avoid rushing through the process of inclusion by completely restructuring our education to fit the needs of both students and teachers. So instead of all students having to learn a specific amount of skills in a certain amount of time by being taught only one method of instruction, we can have the education system support every child to learn at their own pace and use their strategies and skills to solve problems. This method could help students of all ages, regardless of disabilities, learn more and retain more information by the end of the year. I have had experiences with exclusion in our education systems. As my brother went to different schools and therapists to improve his behavior and speech, none of them could help him because of either their lack of experience, lack of funding, or both. My brother is a playful and creative person, and even though he isn't able to speak at all, he communicates with us in his own way. My family dreams of the day when he will be able to speak to us in full sentences, but we aren't going to achieve this if our education isn't fixed now. The world would miss out on a lot if my brother's voice wasn't heard. He's a loud and energetic 10-year-old boy with a passion for running around and making mischief. Without him, my dad jokes that our lives would be very boring. He's the definition of, I turn around 1 second and chaos ensues. I remember I was responsible for watching over him while my parents were working. As I was cleaning up a mess he had made previously, he somehow managed to sneak past me and start running out the door with his peanut butter cup. I had to run out the door after him and grab the candy while still making sure we were both safe. The lecture I received from my parents is still in my head when I think back the incident. As time goes by, we need to realize that we are responsible for what happens in the future. The students sitting in this classroom are the ones building our future. We need to do better and put in the time and effort of making sure these children's passions and their voices are heard. My brother's voice cannot be heard due to his autism, and because of that, we need to do better. According to Forbes, America's education model has killed creativity and entrepreneurship. Based on studies from the Torrance tests of creative thinking, it reveals children have become less emotionally expressive, less energetic, less talkative, less verbally expressive, less humorous, less imaginative, the list goes on. The lack of creativity in these children is depressing because without creativity, children lack the individuality or self-expression that makes them so unique. Those traits of each child are important because they allow individual skills to flourish. If this continues as children become adults, I believe most of the problems we face today could have been solved. The cause of this lack of inclusion and creativity is the stifling conformity of education. As children get older, our education pressures them to conform to the ideal standard of intelligence. Our education punishes children severely when mistakes are made. Our education prevents entrepreneurship because of how we stigmatize failures. How can we create something original if we are afraid to fail? In the same Forbes article, we learn about an interview with Steve Jobs conducted in 1995. When asked about his vision of the world, Jobs replied, "When you grow up, you tend to get told the world is the way it is and your job is just to live inside this world. That's a very limited life. Life can be so much broader when you discover one simple fact. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it, you can influence it, and you can build your own things that people wouldn't use." In the world-renowned TED Talk, How Schools Kill Creativity, Sir Ken Robinson suggests that we let children make mistakes, and instead of denying help to children, we encourage them and guide them to make their path. We hear their voices. Our education system needs to hear my brother's voice, and many others like him, because it's their voice that will create a change. Fixing our education won't be an overnight solution, but we can fix our education to accommodate every student. Thank you.
I want to thank both girls for coming tonight to share their speeches with you they created during the summer program. And thank you to Jennifer for coming as she facilitated the program. Have any questions?
On top of Claire, my mother was an art teacher in high school for over 30 years, and she played classical music in the classroom every day.
Oh, that's cool.
And, yeah, and she said the kids would come in the first day very just not sure why the music was playing, and then she would experiment a few months in and not have it on one day, and the kids would immediately ask for it. So it really helped. And for God, you did a beautiful job. So thank you for sharing the story.
Well, and I just want to thank both of you. To have you come and join us for a summer opportunity and have your final project, both of you, be something that pushes us to try to do better with our teaching is just really exciting. I appreciate both of you taking the opportunity to push us to be better for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Girls are welcome to stay, but I'm sure you want to go home and do something else.
Thank you very much. Did we accommodate everybody who wanted to do the pathways in summer, or did we force?
No, we accommodated everybody. We started out with actually over 200 people that expressed interest, 200 families expressed interest. And I think part of what happened was, we were watching the pandemic and we didn't know what kind of teaching role we would be able to do. And then we were working on the Park and Rec extension as well. So this summer, we can start earlier in planning everything and getting everything out there, because we did have parents say to us that they wanted to do it, but they were worried about not having something So they committed to something.
Okay, has
else.
committed to
Or-
something to, okay.
We were prepared to support double the number, and
Yeah.
then when interest turned into actual enrollment, we
Right.
saw an immediate decline. So I do hope that we have an opportunity to expand next summer, and we will support everybody who expressed an interest.
And how many teaching staff participate in?
Do we have 12? I think we have 12 teachers, yeah. And we had a couple of teachers that did double because those pathways I mentioned before had really high enrollment, so some of them split and had two groups doing them, and with the little ones, we had more than one teacher in the classroom with the little ones. So it was a really low student teacher ratio. Really nice, just got a lot of attention. I came almost every day, they were all around the building. I mean, Jennifer is telling you the truth. I mean, they were out in the front, they were in the tents, they were out in the hallway.
I love that they got from the high school.
Yeah.
I think that itself is a great opportunity for the younger students to be able to see the high school,
Yeah.
sort of a teaser of what's to come.
Yeah.
Yep.
And have we always extended it up through?
No,
No,
I was gonna say,
No.
this is new.
No.
This is such an
We ex-
exciting
yes.
thing to hear this tonight.
yeah, to give you some perspective, the summer program, at least for the years that I've been here, has always been about somewhere around 20-25 kids, and they were always little.
Right, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
it's like, right, it's just elementary, right?
Yeah, so starting last summer, we expanded it to 8th grade, and then
Okay.
this summer we added the TED Talk for the high school students, so,
Oh, how great.
yeah.
and the idea this summer was to provide additional time in standards aligned, grade level appropriate work. It was not built to be directly remedial. It was built to be extra touches for students who expressed that interest. We thought we would have even a larger group, but we're excited about the students that we were able to engage.
And I have to share that with the two of you who did such a beautiful job tonight. We were sitting around my kitchen table a couple nights ago with my older son, who just started his new job. And we were talking about the importance of presentation skills in the workplace.
And so it's such a great experience to have opportunities for that as early as possible. So you both did a beautiful job in that sense as well. Excellent.
Girls.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Jen, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with your.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Speaking of presentations.
Thank you.
So now I'm gonna give you the flip side of
Okay.
what we did for the kids, and this is what we did for the teachers. This was our summer professional learning academy. We've never done this before, so this was a first. It was a big experiment for us to see, first of all, how much interest we had, and to be able to organize it and pull it off and make it meaningful for teachers. So it was offered in a brochure to teachers and we sent out an initial ask at the end of May to see how many people might be interested. We did get a fair amount of interest, and we ended up with close to 65 teachers who participated. These were the sessions that were offered. We wanted to make them very big picture conceptual sessions and things that were very applicable to anyone's classroom so that all the staff could attend. And we had some really popular sessions here as well. The mindfulness session was extremely popular. You'll see a picture of it coming up shortly. The universal design session and the inquiry-based learning session those were all very, very popular. And then we had smaller breakout sessions so that people could actually see how these concepts apply to their specific grade levels. So there was a follow-through session if people were interested in it. It ran for, let me see, did I miss that slide? Oh, slide back. It ran for 3 days, the 23rd through the 25th. It was morning only. So it was 3 hours in the morning, and it was divided up into sessions. So people could pick and choose. They didn't have to attend everything. They were allowed to come one day and not the other two. It was very much a menu of options for them. So it was a little bit of a moving target, but we were able to address all those sessions. So these were the session offerings. This is a shot in here of the mindfulness session. We had a packed room. There were people in the back too that you can't really see. We had two facilitators, Maya and Jill, who've done mindfulness before with us. They came and did that session. There's all the statistics, 63 teachers, and that's how it was broken out.
we were actually surprised because we figured coming off a pandemic year, we didn't think we were gonna get a lot of teachers that were gonna want to come in the summer. But this is, you know, a credit
Ballpark
to our,
20% of our entire staff have been in for 3 days of summer learning.
yep.
Were they compensated?
Yes, they were. We used ESSER funds to provide the additional hours for the teachers.
So this was some of the feedback we got. And interestingly, that last comment there, I just got an email from someone the other day with that comment in it. So I put it into the slide because this is a teacher who has probably emailed me 3 or 4 times telling me what a wonderful thing this is. And she hopes we will do it again. And it was just all positive feedback. We didn't have any teachers say they would not want to do this again. Every single one of them. All 63 said they wanted to come back. And this was just some of the feedback that we got. It was all positive. And the interesting thing has been too, that even during some of our professional learning since school has started, people who have attended these sessions have been participating and bringing the knowledge that they got from these sessions to the work that they've been doing in the building with their PLCs and in their faculty meetings. So we're seeing some really nice transfer. That's the snapshot of the Summer Academy. Questions?
I'm sorry, I was going to point out that we are working on a continuation of this in reoffering some of the most successful sessions
Exactly what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
via Zoom after hours across the school year. And again, if you remember the ESSER plan that we presented, there was always a plan to do this intensively for the summer and then present what might be a little bit of a collapsed contact time via Zoom. So people who went to one session can go to another session, people who heard a really good buzz about one. And again, it would be outside contract evenings. This would be via Zoom so people could get home, take care of their families, but then settle in for something in the evening. So we won't be rolling that out probably during the first quarter, but during the second, third, and fourth quarters, we'll have a modified version of this after hours during the school year. We may add new topics, or we will probably start by representing some of the most popular topics that we
And that's
presented.
the question, because it was funded through ESSER, and if that starts to go away, like, and it says 100% of attendees said they would be interested, is that something to think about as we have for budgeting?
Very much so. And so we have a second summer of ESSER funds that'll be available to us. We had budgeted to do this twice, but yes, we need to start thinking about, do we creep up those PD funds so that we can continue doing this in-house? And there's a little bit of a tension. There's a little tension about not everybody doing the same thing, right? We've really focused on trying to get everybody trained in these pieces. But this is really encouraging us to just keep rolling it out and let people do the areas of interest and then bring it to their colleagues themselves. We've got such a strong structure of PLC within the system that teachers can cross-pollinate. If I do mindfulness and you do Google, we're together enough that we can share that knowledge. And so, yes, the model we're going to look to perpetuate.
Yeah, one of the other big advantages too that I forgot to mention is that just the collaboration of teachers that don't normally see each other or teach the same grade level or teach the same.
They love that.
I had people coming up to me during the session saying, it was so nice to be with elementary school teachers and middle school teachers and speech pathologists and school counselors. You know, they really appreciated that opportunity to see each other and talk to each other and hear each other's perspectives. So this was a resounding success. I'm really proud of this. It went really well, and I'm very proud of the Pathways program too. That was also very successful. Something to build on.
Also plans to do a modified version of the Pathways for Students. That again would be an extension of the school day. So not during this first quarter, but we'll be offering similar student activities that students could then again opt into via Zoom, maybe at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, to extend their school day and get those extra touches. Completely voluntary, not credit bearing, but extra support for students and parents who want to extend their school day. Also currently funded through ESSER, but we will look into the possibility of picking that up after the 2 years of ESSER funds expire.
So now we get to the slightly less fun stuff. We're going to talk about the assessment data. And this was, there was a lot of back and forth last year about, are we going to test? Are we not going to test? And if we test, what's it going to look like? And So when the state decided to release student reports, which are going home tomorrow, for the Smarter Balance and the NGSS, they did give us their rationale, and it's really about the pandemic. That was the real, and I'm going to let Dr. Freeman interject if you have something else to say about this, but their rationale was really about collecting data about how the pandemic affected learning across the state. So looking for the needs of certain districts, or how well kids did with their resources, and who's more resource and who's less resource, and technology, and all of those kinds of things. So the interesting part is the second half of that slide, which talks about how the variations in the learning models and the participation make this not comparable data. So, we have to give you that caveat up front, is that this is sort of a blip, and this testing will always have an asterisk next to it for years to come, and it really is just a snapshot of a moment in time, and it can't really be compared DERG-wise or the other things that you're used to seeing. You're not going to see that this year because it's just they're not valid and reliable comparisons.
We're not making longitudinal comparisons, we're not making geographic comparisons, and we're not making DERG comparisons. These data have a bubble around them. They were last year, and it's really not appropriate to try to put them into a context and look at them against other years or other districts. So we'll share the data with you. We know that they'll be terribly unsatisfying as standalone numbers, but that's really what we have been advised to do and what we feel is best.
Is it true that some districts didn't participate?
Is it true that some districts didn't participate? I don't know. There was an expectation. You will see that our participation rates are again enormously high. We made a real effort to make sure that all students participated, whether they were learning at home last year or learning in school. I do believe there was an expectation that all districts were to participate. I'm unaware of any that didn't.
But I mean, historically, Madison has been at a very low participation.
And again, we don't have comparables, but I don't think that there are going to be a lot of districts that participated at the level to which we participated. We have not seen other districts' data this year. Generally, when the data are released, we get Guilford's, we get a state benchmark, and we can see dirt, right? We didn't receive any other districts. No, the state does not want. Now, there may be people out there putting their own spreadsheets together, calling into all the curriculum offices, but we're not making that effort. We're not looking to make this something that we don't think it should be. I think just when you see our participation scores, you'll be able to recognize not a lot of other people will have participated to that level.
Yeah. This slide really just reiterates what we just said, it's really about the cautions around as you would any other year because of all those variables that are highlighted.
They are being used, these data are being used at the state and national level to make really broad observations. Things like, it appears the students who attended school in person for most or for a large portion of last year performed better overall than students who stayed home for large portions of last year. Sorry. But it is really those very broad observations. It's hard to make other observations.
So if the top
You invited me to comment.
So if you look at the 3 bullets there, these are the conclusions drawn by the CSVE about the testing this past year. In person, this is what we would assume, right? In person learning, students did better than students who are hybrid or remote, and the gaps were greatest in math. There was less of a gap in language arts, which was interesting, and a greater gap in math. So there was no accountability this year, so the test scores are not being used. We're not getting indexes or any kinds of numbers that are going to say how well we are doing in comparison to anybody else. So.
It's also worth remembering that we went into the pandemic, and then when we closed in March, and then when we reopened last year, our focus with educators and families was on social and emotional wellness. We said things like, relationship is more important than rigor, contact is more important than content. We were really focused on taking our students through and keeping them healthy and safe.
Yeah, we really did keep the stress off these tests. We told kids to do the best they could, but not to stress about them. And if you look at our participation rates, I mean, these are really high for a pandemic. We had to really pivot and do remote testing as well. That was something brand new. Nobody had ever done remote testing before. So we had our tech integration specialists working with teachers and kids to make sure they were able to access the tests, both from in school and the kids that were at home. Some of the remote kids did come in and take the test in their buildings in a separate location. So all of that had to be coordinated. But this is where our numbers fell in terms of level 3 or higher.
Remember that between 10 and 13% of our students availed themselves of fully at-home learning last year. And when you think 13%, but look at our participation rates, most of the students who participated at home also completed the assessment.
Well, the one thing that jumps out of this is that somehow in 5th grade math was the biggest downturn. Why would that be?
Well, when I talked to Mr. Hamill about it, his comment was the transition in a pandemic, right? In a virtual year, those kids were virtual coming in. And then some of the disruptions to instructional time because of the pandemic, things like taking mask breaks frequently, the longer time it took for kids to get into the building, the longer time it took for kids to get out of the building, all of those things cut into instructional time.
Right, and if you look at 7th grade also as a transition year, but then think that 4th to 5th grade is a transition from elementary school where you're with one teacher all day long to a middle school model where you're now with 4 teachers and traveling. They made the same transition 6th to 7th grade. Well, they made a building transition, but they didn't transition from the type of school set. So, but again, these are all broad, right, speculations on our part for now. At Baldwin did have a significant impact to instructional time last year, more than some of the others, because of bus complications. Both their arrival and dismissal took some of the longest time, again, because they didn't have the elementary set up and because their students weren't necessarily as independent as the students at Adams and the high school. So they may have lost the most instructional minutes last year to some of those considerations.
Do you think that this data is valuable, I mean, for you to plan, in terms of, you know, not to pick on the 5th grade class for math, but, you know, is it something you feel like you would use to think about next year, what you need to do or anything like that? Or is there other data that you would need to integrate or?
I'm not sure how
I'm just
valuable it
wondering how
was.
you guys are using it.
There was honestly a really rigorous debate about whether or not we should even administer the assessment last year statewide. I am not sure how valuable these data are at a district or school level. I understand a commissioner and a secretary of education wanting them to be able to look broadly at communities and resource distribution, but I really caution about spending too much time at a district or school level with these data. Last year was so completely different than anything we've ever done before. I don't know what these really do tell us.
So this is a snapshot in time. That's how I look at it. You know, this is what was going on at that particular point in time during the pandemic.
This year is gonna be the most
It's gonna be
telling to see, right? To compare, that's, we had a full year of school.
To look at this
to
year and
look
compare,
at- To either show that this was sort of,
to compare back to those, to compare 2 years back. Yeah, I think this year's data will be more interesting if the year unfolds in the way that we're continuing to think it might unfold, right? We're beginning to see that late summer spike begin to settle down. We're hopeful that there's going to be a 12 and under vaccine in a matter of weeks, maybe. So yes, this year's data may be more helpful if things continue to settle. If there's a new variant and a new spike, I don't know what those data would tell us either.
And, sorry, Dr. Crystal, these are administered in the spring, generally, right?
Yep.
These are.
The testing window opens at the end of March.
Right.
We typically wait until April to start giving them, and then they're given, they are actually not timed, so.
Right.
it's in the long periods of time to do them, so.
I think it's, I mean, this is clearly not what you usually see. But it does sort of, you know, good or bad, show that we did have elementary school kids in school 4 days a week. And our other kids were in 2 days
For most of the year.
for most
right?
of the year. And, you know, to sort of reflect on what that means for students in other districts that were home every day.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
that is. That's sobering.
Mhm.
So when this goes home, is there some sort of cover, what, is there some letter that's like that we're seeing, so parents don't go?
Yep, you'll see a letter from me.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a letter from me, and it says basically what it says in those slides, that, yeah, this is not comparable data to compare to years prior. So that it's a moment in time. So this is the-
Do you have any data? Anecdotally, people talk about the fact that um, special needs children suffered more in the pandemic than the ordinary students. Is there anything that you're seeing in the test there that
We were not even allowed to break this out by subgroup. You know,
Oh.
We didn't even get that data, so I couldn't even tell you by subgroup. So, We weren't given any subgroup information.
They don't want people to.
No, that's not.
No, it's not
typical.
typical. No, we usually get it.
This
Breakout
year,
of high,
we usually
you know,
is
high
subgroup.
needs students.
that is?
Yeah, this year they did not give us subgroup information. So this is the science, the NGSS test.
Next generation science standards for those of you who are wondering.
Which is really, in my opinion, a reading test, because there's a lot of reading and there's a lot of looking at data and a lot of thinking skills involved in the test. They pretty much give you everything that you need. So it's less based on science instruction specifically as it is on science thinking. It's really about scientific thinking. This is where we landed there.
Dr. Crystal, the percentages that we're seeing for 70, 67, and 60, that is the percentage of what they've learned based on what they should have learned in that year.
Well, these are the levels that the tests are broken out into. So level 3 is meets expectations.
Okay.
So these are all the students that got the meets expectations
Oh,
or the
okay.
advanced in terms of their performance on the assessment.
So all of these assessments have been benchmarked and educators have looked at it and determined at this grade level, how should these students perform on these assessments? It's broken out into 4 bands and we're reporting to you the students who met and exceeded. And therefore that would mean that there are 27% of the students who failed to meet. And so that's the way that we're reporting these data.
And I'm going to invite Julia to come and sit right next to me. She's got the context and the background on the high school slides. These were our SAT results from the spring, our SAT school day. So Julia, will give them a little background on the testing.
So a lot of the SAT sessions that students are allowed to take on Saturdays were not available last year due to COVID. So students didn't necessarily have as many exposures to the SAT going into Connecticut SAT Day. That's the first anomaly. The second piece of this is we saw the largest dip in our math performance versus our evidence-based reading and writing. And again, I think that's attributed to that mixture of hybrid learning. We had some students who were fully distance learning for the entire year. And so monitoring skill progression with mathematics in particular was challenging only because the students there was so much more variability because of the different students' experiences with mathematics instruction. And so this year, we're sort of using this information as a way to, as a foundational way to look at the bands within the SAT where there was more of a struggle. And the teachers are using that information to sort of augment in the instruction that they're doing in the mathematics classroom in particular.
It's also important to remember that we report out the scores for students who took the assessment in school on Connecticut CAT Day. Guilford students did have opportunities to retake SATs after our administration and those Saturday offerings My son actually took another one here at Guilford High School on a Saturday. And so we're not necessarily reporting out to you the Guilford final results, and we're certainly not reporting the super scores. We're reporting the results on that one day, which this year, different than other years, may have been the first try for most students rather than the second or even third try for many students.
Well, what does it mean when it says 85% net? I mean, I thought that the SAT was just got a numbered score.
You just get a numbered score. The state, similarly to the SBAC testing and the NGSS testing, the state does determine bands of performance levels. And so when it says 85% met, that's the cutoff that the state determined that students should demonstrate to show that they are meeting the performance level on this particular standardized test.
Remember, we used to take an 11th grade SBAC test as well as a 3 through 8, and then Connecticut decided to use the SAT in place of the SBAC. So they created the same bands, which would normally then be lumped into our accountability formula to create a school performance index and a district performance index. So while the state is reporting this in the same way, we're not running those formulas and providing those indices this year. So again, it's information without accountability attached to it this year.
But these are, right, these are Connecticut scores, right? A kid uses his or her SAT from this day, and what goes is 567 on
Yes.
math and
Yes.
642.
They see the
on
traditional
English or
SAT score
whatever.
sent to their colleges. I'll also add, however, and I do believe this is good news, many more
Right.
colleges are becoming test optional or are not accepting SAT scores at all,
Right.
recognizing the same difficulties that we're recognizing.
So here is our AP data. So I don't know how well you remember the numbers from previous years. We did have fewer students take the AP exams this year. They had the option to take it or not take it, whereas in previous years, if you were, non-pandemic years, if you were enrolled in an AP class, the expectation is that you do take the exam. So the total number of students taking the exam is lower than we typically see for that reason. And again, you see some variation in the performance levels. We typically have a higher percentage of the students performing at 3, 4, and 5. The highest score you can get on an AP exam is a 5. We did see more 3s this year than we typically see. However, there were some courses that were anomalies and performed quite well. The other thing about this past year that was odd was they did 3 waves of testing, which I think did affect the mindset of the students in some ways, because typically the first 2 weeks of May, all of the exams are given, and then there's a week for makeup exams if there's some kind of a conflict, if you're enrolled in courses that are running at the same time. This year, because they did 3 waves, I think our last wave of testing was close to June, which is very atypical for AP students to experience. So you think about the marathon of the school year, right? And you're close to June and facing this high stakes exam that you have to take. We do think that affected some of the performance levels of the students as well, just because, and coupled with some of the exams were done digitally, and some of the exams were paper and pencil exams. So it wasn't even like the format was consistent. And you think about the number of students that we have who take multiple AP classes, preparing for each of those exams became a little bit more tricky because it wasn't necessarily done the way that it's always been done. And that affected the teachers as well in terms of how they helped to prepare for those exams with the students. That said, I was pleasantly surprised at how well our students did on the AP exams overall, simply because it was such a weird year and there was struggles to allow the students to have the collaborative time that they usually get in those classes. It was hard to replicate in Zoom. They made valiant efforts to do so, but it was definitely a strange year for them in terms of their AP experiences. I have gotten some questions from parents about, are we offering fewer advanced placement courses? And I think that is stemming from last year was we had to reduce the class sizes, but we did not reduce the number of AP course offerings, nor are we planning to do that. So the courses were fully enrolled, and we did run all 17 AP courses that we've been running for many years now.
Last but not least, we have the IB information.
So again, you'll see that this has a lot more information on the slide. It tells you how many diploma candidates there were on the second line. It's a very small n for us. We've been much closer to 20 to 22, 23 diploma students in previous years. This year, this particular cohort of students is much lower because the previous spring, when we're talking and meeting with students about IB as an option and whether that's something that they want to do or not, we weren't able to do that as thoroughly as we typically do. And so there were fewer, in this particular cohort of students, there were fewer diploma students. Consistent with previous years, you'll see that 7 out of the 10, this is the fourth line of data, 7 out of the 10 did get their diplomas, meaning that they performed well enough in all 6 subject areas of IB classes to receive the IB diploma. This is fairly consistent with previous years as well. We've had an attrition rate of about 3, maybe 4 students who just miss the mark or don't quite get through all of the assessments that they need to complete to get the diploma at the end of their second year of the coursework. So there were 3 students who started out as diploma students, and they either dropped back to become certificate students and kept many of their IB classes, but not all of them, or they were just 1 or 2 points shy of getting the diploma program, the full diploma with the diploma program.
Remember, with such a small n, even that small, right? And so if we normally have 23 students and 3 or 4 don't continue through, has much less of an impact on the percentage of completion when you've got twice the end.
Yes, but 70% compared to 89
Correct.
is not a world beat.
No, it is not. And I think that I think this year, by building the program back up to more students doing the diploma program, you're going to see that we will be closer to the international performance the way we have been in previous years. I know the first cohort, not very much, but they did exceed the world average just slightly. And we've been very consistently performing along with that, with the second cohort of students as well. Although, with the issue is that IB also had to change their testing for 1 year, and all of the internal assessments will pretty much determine what the student's score was for not in these numbers, but in the numbers from the year before. There was a lot of back and forth in IB world about whether or not the external assessments were going to happen or not. And so by the time they came out and said that they were doing the external assessments, that did impact the pacing of the courses and how that pacing typically goes. So in these numbers, you see a more accurate reflection of both the internal and external assessments, both, which sounds like a lot on the student, but actually gives the student more of a fighting chance in terms of demonstrating growth over time. So the internal assessments allow for that demonstration of growth, and they count for a significant portion of your final performance in the course. The external assessment is more of a snapshot at the end to demonstrate how much of it have you synthesized in such a way that you can apply it to a novel setting. So unlike an AP exam where you sit and you have to remember information and apply it to particular passages that you're reading and or questions that you're answering, with IB, you are retaining information, but you're also often applying it to a novel situation, particularly in the sciences and mathematics. So you might not have seen the problem before. You might not have seen the physics problem before. You might be using the knowledge base that you have to try to figure out a completely unfamiliar thing that you're seeing for the first time.
Perhaps to state the obvious too, is the unknown impact that this pandemic had on mental health and engagement. And in the last 7 or 8 years, had 2 juniors in high school in my house, which are stressful years anyway. I mean, I just think there's an unknown, which is not about hybrid versus remote versus in person. It's about living through a pandemic.
And I've been trying to figure out how to state this, but I think it's worth noting that internationally, many of the IB schools are whole school programs. And I think a whole school that's trying to support students through that experience. We had 10 students that we were working to support through that experience, while also supporting all of the AP students, while also supporting all of the regular educational students, while also supporting the students. And so I just think that there was maybe a built-in support system when a whole school was doing it that we were less able to stand up and provide to all of those students because of they were such a small and unique and going through this experience. It's part of the fact that IB is still so new in Guilford. It's part of the fact that it was never designed as a whole school program in Guilford. And if this year continues to be as impacted as last year, we have to figure out more ways to provide those supports. First thing we have going for us is 5 days of in-person schooling right from day one, rather than that not beginning until much, much later in the year. Remember, the IB program is a 2-year cohort, and so we've got a cohort teeing up for graduation this year who were impacted last year, and they need to get those supports. So we'll be working on that this year.
It's the curriculum in other countries. I mean, the schools are doing, it is the curriculum.
Yes.
From the time they start school to the time they graduate. It isn't that.
Yeah, and it's not one additional program that the teachers are supporting in addition to other stuff. It's the one thing that you're doing. And when a whole community is doing that together, I think that there's something about the support and the social emotional supports and the peer support that we may have really been challenged to provide as well last year.
Are the numbers, and what are the numbers looking like for this year's junior class? That's the next.
I believe we were, for the diploma students, we were hovering right at 20 students. So that's much closer to where we were in terms of student interest. We're finding that, now IB doesn't care about this at all. We are finding that we have more students who are interested in the certificate option, because then they can sort of cherry pick which courses that they want to showcase on their transcript. And that makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, in terms of it's difficult as a student to put yourself out there in 6 subject areas to take on that kind of rigorous coursework. That said, we think that the diploma experience, in terms of how we have the benefit now of students coming back and talking about what it's like when they go to college as a diploma student graduate versus, friends of theirs who maybe took more of the certificate options through Guilford High School. And from those conversations with those graduates, we're finding that there is a lot of value added to the experience, because I can stand up in front of a group of teenagers and say that all day long, but it's a far different thing when you hear a young person who's been in college for a year or two come back and say, it's worth it. You should do it. And here's why you should do it. And here are the benefits that I got out of it when I went to college. So
The diploma, excuse me, the diploma
yeah,
versus.
the diploma versus the sort of picking and choosing option of
Yeah.
you know, the other way.
How many are kids taking AP and IB or
They are.
simultaneously?
They are, yes. There is a little bit of an issue with structure. So the IB courses are all a 2-year sequence, one course over 2 years. So in senior year, if this is your big opportunity to take, let's say, AP Calculus PC, and it conflicts with your higher level IB literature course, then that's a difficult choice that has to be made. But that doesn't mean that we don't have students who are taking both IB and AP courses.
The reason I ask is, what will the students who did a lot of AP work come back and say from college compared to the kids who did the IB? Would we predict similar kinds of value added?
We haven't had AP students come back specifically with that messaging. It's certainly something that we could explore. I think that the AP program in Guilford High School is so well established that the word of mouth piece of it supersedes any of the messaging that we've done, you know, from the administrative level, the teacher level. That said, I think it's a great question, and one worthy of exploring.
Let me ask it differently. The perception is that AP courses gives you a leg up in college admission. Does IB give you a bigger leg up?
From the data that I've seen in terms of acceptance rates to some of the more prestigious, difficult schools to get into, indications seem to be that you have a diploma from IB.
Yes.
You have a much better chance of getting into one of those schools.
Yes, and I think anecdotally, what we hear from the students is that there's an element of cohort related to the students who go through the IB program together. And so they also talk about learning the ability to study collaboratively and lean on each other, and that there is a certain college life skill that they report bringing more from, I think, the IB experience than other students who do the a la carte AP and more traditional experience.
So the logic of my question is this. Could we capture the best of an IB program and an AP program? Create some equivalent, but it's Guilford. The students, most students who might want to do IB, for example, or even more AP, wouldn't have to choose. They could get some combination in the special program, get the benefits of both without the external pressure of having to do 6 courses over 2 years, but we get the same cohort experience and the same power of a top-rated academic thing, such that the Guilford curriculum would be, in some sense, a powerful hybrid of the best of what we learn from these programs. Would that be a mix that we would want? Simply because students would get the community benefits without the same pressure of the 2-year experience.
It's a really big question. I'm going to have to ask for some time to listen.
I mean, I know that the IB program is becoming nationally known in really good school districts.
Oh, it is.
Really good school districts have IB programs, you know, so it's hard because it's starting to have a certain, you know, as you said.
I mean, part of the difficulty for us with the AP becomes the size and the schedule. And so when you're only 1,000 students and you've got some who want music and some who want lit and some who want, right, how do you create that cohort when you've got students sort of popping in? IB was brought in specifically because it's the commitment. But again, I don't want to answer the question until we've had some time to sit and think about
We
it.
know a lot of high-cost prep schools essentially do this. And that's their value added. And clearly IB is the gold standard. But you're not going to get a very high percentage of your students taking IB anyway. So if it's 10%, 15%, the question is how many students from in the top, say 40% or 50% would really benefit from some sort of a, not just taking AP courses, like we take regular courses, but we take a program.
Well, right, I think we'd have to create a set schedule
It's
and
almost
then
an
try to,
honors
right,
program.
and say you've got this AP Lit and this AP Math and this AP Science. And do you get a certain number of
Yeah.
kids to take that set schedule? But what that would do in reality is then make it harder for the student who wanted to create the individual customized schedule.
Right.
Because we would, unless we went to class sizes of 6 and raised staffing to hold that flexibility. So I can hear where you're going. I'm immediately going to the challenges of the schedule, the logistics, the staffing, the FTEs, and don't want to start saying, no, we can't until we have time to think about it
No,
more.
I don't want to answer.
Yeah.
It's just that the first part of the evening was about the power of the cohort.
And
Okay. the
project
little kids
based,
are getting together in groups. Everybody's saying it's wonderful.
High Tech High does some really exciting
How
stuff.
do we institutionalize what we know works? That's all.
I think
No,
we
I-
would also have to really look at the assessment structures as well. Because the experience with the assessment through IB is a much different collaborative
Yeah.
experience than an AP assessment experience.
They test very differently.
Our IB program is still relatively new.
Yes.
If you talk to your counterparts at schools that have had IB established for 10 years, you see a higher percentage of kids taking the IB than we do.
Yes, and we are on the cusp of that
Yeah, very much
IB
so.
growth. So this year, we're running 2 sections of IB literature, 2 sections of IB history, which we've never done before because we have that much more interest in just taking the courses. We also have come to a place where we have someone trained to teach IB psychology. There's been a huge demand at GHS for a long time for an advanced psychology course that goes beyond a semester length intro course that we have called human behavior. And so that is generating interest in the IB diploma program that we didn't have before because you can substitute your arts group with another course from another group. So we have some students this year in the diploma program who instead of taking theater or visual arts, their group 6 requirement, they're taking psychology instead. So once you start to diversify like that, it allows for the student to gravitate towards interests that they have, which then allows the program to grow.
Well, I think having more numbers of students that are involved in it and sort of the creativity to do different things in different courses will draw more students. And some of the critiques or comments that I heard from parents in the very first cohort of kids who either stuck through it or left were that their kids, because they're teenagers, literally got sick of being with the same people all day long. And you know, it was the same people, the same, for me, it was like being in elementary school.
Right.
And in that way. And so that they didn't feel like they had enough opportunity to move around and be with other people and different things like that. So the numbers just didn't.
And then when they all showed up at the prom together, we couldn't get them to. But yes, you're right. That is very much, that is a unique experience with IB and it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
I've heard positives.
I've heard a lot of positives.
It depends who you were speaking to and on what day.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you both.
Sure. Yeah, I think, and if we have other questions, that's the end of.
All right, excellent.
Thank you.
So we actually have just one more item on our agenda. It is a receipt for possible action, ratification of the Unite Here Local 217 dining services contract. In the board materials, there is the 3-pager that gives information about this. Kristen Peck, John Delventura and I were met with the administration about this tentative agreement. Again, this is the dining services. And I will just give some basic information that is here. This is a 3-year contract. The proposal is for a 2.25% increase in each of the 3 years of the contract. There is an increase in the premium contribution rates over the 3 years of 0.5% each year. It started at 16.5%, then to 17, and then 17.5%. There was some language added to clarify the way seniority works within the bargaining unit when there are open positions. When someone has left, and there is a clarification about snow days. And this is really a temporary language thing while we're still in a pandemic, right?
Well, actually, it is moot as of
Oh.
today, but
Never mind.
but stays there because the language explains how we will respond to these workers should there be a snow day that is picked up and becomes a virtual distance learning day.
Which we can't.
And while right now, as of today, the state is not allowing
Allowing
that,
that.
there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of lobbying happening. And it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that before the first snow falls, we will have permission to have distance learning days. So the language, we thought better to leave it in there than take it out. It's available should we need it.
Okay, thank you
It's
for that
also available
clarification.
should the numbers spike so high that because of the pandemic, we go
Right,
distance, this would then be applicable there as well.
okay. So we each have, again, a copy of this, redlined to provide clarification, particularly in section 4, article 6, about the new language. Again, the 3 of us that were on this committee had an opportunity to sit with the administration and go over this last week. But I don't know if any board members have questions, having reviewed this. Again, I believe that their group has already signed off on.
Yes, they've already voted and ratified
voted,
pending
okay.
your approval.
So if we are comfortable, we can vote on this tonight. But I do want to, note that that doesn't have to happen tonight if anyone is not comfortable. And also there's an opportunity now to ask any questions if anyone has them.
It's a pretty thin settlement and it was achieved really amicably and collaboratively and relatively quickly with this bargaining unit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's one question. I know when there had to be some attrition of employees because there just wasn't the work for them when we were fully remote. There was some attrition. And were any of those folks hired back? And then how does that work with seniority? Are there any circumstances like that? I guess is that.
It's a really good question. I can't answer it off the top of my head. I do know that we lost a number in this group and we had to do significant hiring in this group in order to be ready to open for the school year. I don't, which would lead me to assume that anybody who was reduced last year had the opportunity to come back before any of those new hires were put into
Well,
place.
they would be on the
Yes,
rehire list.
right.
That's
So
what I mean, so they lose that
So you have to
seniority.
clear the offer to the rehire
Yes.
list. And if they don't take it within a certain period of time, then.
No, I
you can
understand
go
but
on.
there should, yes, there would have been
I'm saying-
loss of 10 months or a year. Yes, so I'd have to go back and look
Yeah.
specifically.
It's just unique to the pandemic and.
Yep.
this.
Any other questions? Is the board comfortable in voting on this?
Yes.
All right. So I will entertain a motion to approve this tentative agreement for the food service employees, or ratification essentially of this contract.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right,
Thank you all.
so that's 8 of us, okay, that are here, that are approved the ratification of this contract for the dining services.
All right, that is the end of our meeting tonight. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all very much. And then Julia, thank